Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, a novel by Robert Tine, based on a screenplay by Chris Matheson and Ed Solomon, read by the novelization of film. Prologue. A short introduction to the excellent adventures of Bill S. Preston, Esquire, and Ted Theodore Logan so far. Being excellent to one another and partying on is not as simple as it looks. It involves a lot of hard work, time travel, a most triumphant band called Wild Stallions, and of course, Bill S. Preston, Esquire, and Ted Theodore Logan. Not long ago, Bill and Ted were more or less ordinary guys in San Dimas, a more or less ordinary town in California, and at that time, Bill and Ted had two major problems. They were flunking history, and they were experiencing a total lack of babes. Passing history was important, they thought, because if they didn't, they would totally flunk out of school, heinous, and Ted would get sent to military school in Alaska, bogus and heinous. It turns out, though, that was the least of their problems, because a totally non-heinous dude called Rufus showed up from the future and informed them that the entire future of the world rested on Bill and Ted getting an A+ on their history report. So, with some assistance from the Circuits of Time, Billy the Kid, a Greek dude called Socrates, Napoleon, Ludwig van Beethoven, Joan of Arc, Genghis Khan, Abraham Lincoln, and Sigmund Freud, Bill and Ted traveled back in time, then forward, met themselves in the future, set things up so they would be able to pass their history test in the past, traveled back in time, passed the test, met two totally bodacious babes, Joanna and Elizabeth, saved the world, founded their triumphant band, Wild Stallions, and decided to learn how to play the guitar. Got it? Makes sense. Excellent. San Dimas, California, A.D. 2691. Chapter 1. The future is a foreign country. They do things totally triumphantly there. By the time A.D. 2691 rolls around, things will be different. The air will be clean, people will be happy, bowling scores will be way up, miniature golf scores will be way down. Things will be totally non-heinous. And who do future generations have to thank for this? Bill and Ted. Except, don't you know it, some people are never satisfied. Take, for example, a totally bogus dude named Denomalos. The fact that things were going bodaciously in the 25th century really bothered the guy, and he had a plan to change everything for everybody. Everything would be worse for everyone, except for Denomalos, of course. A big part of Denomalos' plan, you see, was that he, Denomalos, would totally rule the world. Bogus, right? So, once again, it was up to Bill and Ted. This time, they could not fail. "It is time," said Denomalos. His words were hard, cool, serious, like the man himself. He was seated in a dark, barren room, lit by a single shaft of light, which streamed through a single, small window high up on one bare wall. "It is time. They have reached the second crucial turning point in their destiny. There," he paused, and his beady eyes narrowed in disgust. "Their message is about to reach millions." His expression changed slowly from one of loathing to a kind of evil happiness and pride. "We will change that." Denomalos was not alone in his hideaway. With him were a dozen or more students, handpicked to help him in his mission to achieve world domination. They were grim-faced, hard-looking young men and women, dressed, like their leader, from head to toe in black. All were armed. The students nodded in agreement with Denomalos' bitter words. "When our mission is successful, no longer will our world be dominated by the legacy of the two." His sneer intensified. "Fools." Denomalos' followers knew when and how to get on the good side of their boss. "Idiots," they said. "Morons. Cretins." "And no longer," Denomalos continued, "will we hear this hated sound." His hands clawed the air in front of his chest, and the strains of a tortured air guitar split the room. "We will stop them now," he growled. He looked at the rebels, reading determination on every face. "Are we ready?" The rebels answered emphatically. They slammed rounds of ammunition into the chambers of their weapons and nodded. "Onward, ordered Denomalos. Over at the Bill and Ted University, established AD 2425, it was 9 o'clock in the morning and the first class air guitar bell had just sounded. Students were assembling in a learning center. They used to be called classrooms, for their class in physics of acoustical reverberation, guitar. No one paid much attention when the room began to vibrate, slowly at first, then faster, followed by a rush of noise, like a jet fighter taking to the skies. Then there was a shower of sparks and light exploding, like 100 rockets. When the smoke had cleared, a phone booth stood in the middle of the room. Out stepped Rufus. Rufus was a totally triumphant dude, even for a teacher, and was well known as an old friend, mentor, and advisor to Bill and Ted. Rufus, it was agreed around Bill and Ted U, was the personification of everything that is, has been, or will be rock and roll. Cool, cavalier, and cocky, he dressed like a rock star and was almost never seen without his ultra-hip shades. Greetings, my excellent pupils. Today we continue our study of the physics of acoustical reverberation. Please meet our most non-heinous guest lecturers for the day. Rufus gestured toward the phone booth, and an old dude stepped out. He was gray-haired and wore a funny old-fashioned suit, sort of like the ones the fried chicken dude Colonel Sanders wears, only black instead of white. He bowed politely to the class. Say hello to our old friend, Thomas Edison, the inventor of something that used to be called the phonograph. That was before CDs, and you know how old they are. Okay, to help us out on the musical side of things, Mr. Johann Sebastian Bach. A short, fat man dressed in knee breeches and wearing a powdered wig stepped from the booth. He looked a little bewildered, but managed to say, Guten Tag, class. Next up from the booth was another fine musician. And say hello, said Rufus, to Sir James Martin of Faith No More, founder of Faith No More Cultural and Theological Center. James Martin, one of the titans of 20th century music, stepped from the booth. Station, he said. Station, responded the class, much in awe that the driving genius of no less a band than Faith No More stood before them. Rufus introduced the last guest lecturer. And from the 23rd century, Miss Rhea Pichel, inventor, as you know, of the stereophonic oxygenic ampligraphion deliverator. Hard to imagine a world without them. Pichel stepped from the phone booth and stationed. Who's got a guitar? Asked Rufus. I have, Rufus, said a student from the back of the class. Excellent. Johann and James have put their heads together and have come up with a little number. Maybe we can get them to play it for us later. Kind of a speed metal concerto. But before class begins, I have a couple of announcements. Remember, Friday, Ben Franklin and Aretha Franklin will be here. And on Saturday, we've got the field trip to ancient Babylonia. We've got the Hanging Gardens booked for 4:31 BC sharp. Also, important, as always, no homework, ever, without your headphones on. Got it? The class got it. Good. Okay, yesterday, we were talking about the disposition of the incipient angle and its relationship to harmonic dissonance. Thomas, you want to take it from here? Thomas Edison stepped forward, his glasses perched on the end of his nose. He glanced at his notes. The incipient angle and harmonic dissonance are totally non-heinous. I think we all agree on that. But, and a very big but, Rufus's class never got the chance to find out what that big but was, because suddenly, the doors of the classroom flew open, and Denomalos' rebels crashed into the room, bursting with menace, like a crack commando team. A group of them trained their weapons on the terrified students. One corralled Bach and Edison, another put a gun to Rufus's throat. Then Denomalos swept into the room like a conquering general. On either side of him were two figures, heavily draped in dark hooded robes. For a second, even a totally triumphant dude like Rufus could only gape. When he managed to find his voice, he could only stammer, Denomalos, my old teacher. Rufus, said Denomalos, his voice heavy with contempt. My favorite student. Rufus was still stunned. I thought you were dead? No, just in preparation. I worked within the system until I could stand it no longer. But soon, this system will never have existed. You won't get away with it, spat Rufus. Time will tell. Time has told. Denomalos nodded toward the telephone booth. I will go back and change that. You You can never change the future, not by yourself. And who said anything about doing it by myself? Rufus, you surprise me. I have a secret weapon. 2 secret weapons, in fact. Denomalos snapped his fingers, and the 2 hooded figures flanking him threw off their cloaks. Rufus and the class gasped, unable to believe their eyes. Bach was surprised too. Was his los? He asked Edison. Standing in the middle of the room, bobbing excitedly, were Bill and Ted. They waved to all present. "How's it going, dudes?" "Wilhelm und Ted?" said Bach. "Impossible," said Rufus. "Bill and Ted would never work for you, Denomalos. You are totally too non-heinous." "I wouldn't want them," snapped Denomalos. Those imbeciles. Denomalos' crew knew their cue. "Morons," they muttered. "Cretins, idiots." "Then how?" demanded Rufus. Denomalos snapped his fingers. Bill and Ted nodded and grabbed their lower lips and yanked their skin, pulling off their faces, revealing an elaborate patchwork of intricate wiring and circuitry. The students stared, their mouths agape. One even passed out, and that seemed to please Denomalos. Bill and Ted pushed their skin back into place. "So you see, Rufus, I have laid my plans very carefully. These automatons, my old student, are replicas only, programmed with my agenda." He turned to the Evil Bill and Evil Ted. "Now, what is your mission?" "Okay," said Evil Bill. "First, we totally kill Bill and Ted." "Yeah," said Evil Ted. "Then we totally take over their lives." "Whoa," said Evil Bill delightedly. "Then we utterly destroy them." "Yeah, then at the Battle of the Bands, we give the speech they were gonna give." "Denomalos," said Rufus soberly, "you cannot ruin the Battle of the Bands. It is too important to all of us, to the future history of the world." Denomalos chuckled. "There shall be a new future. A new future will be born. A great future, eh?" "Don't tell us," said Evil Bill. "You programmed us." "Yeah," said Evil Ted. "He's totally a robot." "So are you, dude. We're totally metalheads." The air was split with a long, wild riff of air guitar. "Silence," ordered Denomalos. "That, I am thankful to say, is a sound whose time is fast disappearing." He fixed a stern eye on his men. "What is the fuel?" he demanded like a tough schoolteacher. "Fear," said his henchmen. "What is the engine?" "Discipline," they answered obediently. "What is the ideal?" "Order." Denomalos turned to Evil Bill and Evil Ted and stared intently at them. "And how shall we achieve it?" The robots were well trained. Instantly, they put on their shades and stepped into the phone booth. They spoke in unison. "Death to Bill and Ted." "Exactly," said Denomalos, smacking one hand into the other. "Now, go do your master's bidding." "Later, dude," said Evil Ted. Rufus had taken advantage of the shift in attention and grabbed the guitar from his student. As the phone booth began to disappear into the floor in a great shower of sparks and smoke, he hooked the instrument onto the edge of the booth's antenna. "Stop him!" yelled Denomalos. Suddenly, the room was alive with wild gunfire, the shrieks of the terrified students, and the loud, characteristic "Whoa!" of Bill and Ted, evil or otherwise, disappearing into the circuits of time. When the smoke cleared, they were gone, and so was Rufus. Denomalos' eyes blazed with anger. "You fools! You let him escape!" The henchmen hung their heads, wondering if their master was on the verge of giving the order that they open fire on one another. "He cannot succeed," growled Denomalos. "I will not permit it. Do you understand me? They will be destroyed. Those evolutionary mistakes." "Bird brains! Imbeciles!" said the henchman dutifully. I must prevail because history has already been written." He grabbed a book from one of his men and held it aloft, seemingly to threaten the students with it. "Have you any idea what this kind of thing costs?" It was a textbook decorated with a hugely overblown picture of Denomalos. The title told the whole story. Nomalos Denomalos, the greatest man in history. Johann Sebastian Bach rolled his eyes. "Scheissnemund." Denomalos whipped around and pointed at him. "You! Detention!"